අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා. අලුතෙන් SLT Mobitel Home 4G LTE connection ගන්නායට වටිනා tab computers සහ data දීමනා.
Surf Excel නම් භාගයයි මාසයකට වඩා රිදි සෝතයි.
In your headlines tonight, to the rescue, Sri Lanka expected to welcome an IMF delegation next week for crucial talks. Ripple effect, sky-high fuel prices expected to lead to major inflationary pressures with transportation charges upped.
If public transport, those are losing, what will happen is again the poor man is going to get affected because those are the poor man's transport modes.
More pressure. Distributors warn of an imminent LP gas shortage if dollars aren't found by tomorrow. Trading places. India's Adani Group to set up $500 million northern renewable energy projects after China's snub. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Sunday, the 13th of March, 2022.
සුවඳ ජැස්මින් සහ විටමින් E සාරය සමගින් Novalax White.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. Joining you tonight with news from across Sri Lanka and around the world, I'm Indivari Amuatha. The fuel price hikes announced by the country's two fuel suppliers have driven already heavy economic pressure on the public to new levels. This has led to a domino effect starting with the transportation sector, with private bus operators and logistics providers ready for a major hike in fares and charges. Now, talks between private bus operators and Minister of Transport Dilum Amunugama look to have reached an agreement on a revision in fares from midnight tomorrow, but will be confirmed only after approval is sought at tomorrow's cabinet meeting.
From midnight on Friday, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation increased their prices of a litre of petrol by 76 to 77 rupees and diesel by 55 to 95 rupees. The CPC move followed a price hike implemented by the Lankan Indian Oil Company on Thursday. Following this, three-wheeler taxi operators have now been forced to increase their per-kilometre fares to 60 rupees. Private bus operators, meanwhile, have called on the government to greenlight a fare price hike of 15% or provide diesel at subsidized rate through the Sri Lanka Transport Board depots, as has been done in the past week during the shortage. In this backdrop, bus operators held a meeting with Minister of Transport Dilum Amunugama to discuss the way forward. Addressing the media briefing after the meeting, the minister hinted that bus fare prices could be increased from midnight tomorrow, as the government is not in a position to provide a subsidy. Meanwhile, the Association of Container Transporters has decided to hike their transport charges by 60% from midnight today. In the meantime, transport economics expert Professor Lalitha Sirigonaruwan says that an obvious effect on inflation can be expected, which will hit the country's most vulnerable sections.
When the prices of inputs go up, mainly the fuel price, which is a significant component of cost of these transporters, obviously those industries, they can't run at a loss. They need to have the possibility of putting their outputs price also high. If public transport, particularly the bus as well as the railway, those are losing, what will happen is again the poor man is going to get affected because those are the poor man's transport modes. I would consider the fuel price increase is absolutely necessary, and my only concern is that it was late. It should have been done a few months back. But then fuel price increase, if you did not increase, what it would mean is that the government would be supplying fuel at a lower price, but at a greater cost to the treasury or to the CPC. Now what will happen there? CPC is going to run at a loss. So true owner of the CPC is the general public. So CPC being run down is basically affecting the poor man on his ownership. Plus that loss CPC would incur would finally be borne by the taxpayer.
Now, the pressure on the public from multiple price hikes driven by global fuel prices and the devaluation of the rupee has been staggering in the past week or more. And now, with the latest fuel price hike announced by the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, transportation costs are set to spike to never seen before levels. With that, the ripple effect will naturally see prices of commodities and anything else that requires transportation rise accordingly. With bus operators having now received the go-ahead for a significant hike in fares, the screws have been tightened even further on the people. So what's the solution, or is there a solution at all? We have with us tonight the country's Minister of Transport, Dilum Amunagama, to talk us through the current crisis and how the government intends to respond. Good evening and a warm welcome.
Good evening.
Doesn't it seem like the people are going to, at the end of the day, suffer? Will this continue to put too much pressure, or do you have plans to mitigate it so that the burden on the people will be relieved?
There were several discussions which we held today within the day, and I've also discussed with the Minister of Finance as well. So we still have not decided on the price hike or what the rates are, but I'm sure by tomorrow evening we will have to take a decision about it. But I can assure the public one thing, that we will be going at the lowest possible rates. Today I managed to get all the bus operators to agree to agreement that we would only go by the lowest price hike, which would obviously it would affect the people, but we try to minimize the effect because there is no other option. So I think by tomorrow midnight there will be a price hike in the bus fare, but it will be to a very minimum level.
Do you know how this minimum level will be? Do you have an indication?
It should be, I think we should be able to keep it to about maybe about 2 or 3 rupees, maybe 3 rupees to the minimum transport wage. That is, the minimum transport wage right now is 17 rupees. So there is a possibility of this going to maximum. It might go to about 20 rupees. So we are trying to keep it within that.
Right, but this also takes us to the question of the CTB and our railways. When you try to cut down on the fares and try to minimize the pressure on the people, we also look at these two entities. They've been loss-making for years and decades now. What will be the end result here? What sort of effect will it have on the institutions? Can we even think of reviving these institutions?
First of all, I must tell you that the CTB is not running at a loss anymore. CTB is a profit-making institute right now. They pay their own salaries, and it has also been, we managed to keep it a profit-making institution during the COVID season also, because we were into some government transport missions at that time. Railway, of course, is it runs at about 8 billion loss per year, and the very reason is that the train rates or the fare has not been raised for a long time. So those are, it's actually the train fare is about 60% of what the bus fare is. It's even lower. So we are trying to put this on track as well. And of course, if there is a hike in the prices, it will be even the CTB. Also, there is the same price increase, because we cannot run the CTB also at a loss. So when there is a bus fare that will be amended, if we amend it tomorrow, it will be for both, for the private buses and for CTB as well, because there is no way that CTB also can pump fuel at a higher rate and transport at a low rate.
Private bus owners have also been asking for a subsidy. Is that something you're looking at?
It is, we discussed with them also. I've spoken to the finance ministry as well, but it is not a practical solution, because then again we will have to find the funds for that subsidiary, and then someone will have to provide them the phone, as I saw Mr. Gunruan stating. If CTB tries to take the burden, then the CTB will go down, and then again it has a spiral effect on the public, because it will be a public-owned entity which goes down. So it is not trade like fisheries. You could subsidize, because you can. It's not an area as big as the public transport. But when it comes to bus transport, a subsidiary is not practically implementable. So this is the problem with the subsidiary.
Now the Container Transport Association has requested, or they want to raise charges by 60%, which will lead to a massive hike in cost of consumer products and other goods. There is also a big effect on the economic activity as fuel prices hike, and there is constraints in transportation. What are we looking at here? What are you looking at here as a government and the Ministry of Transport?
As the Ministry of Transport, I think it is high time that we also start taking control over other means of transport also other than public transport only, because the rates for container transport or water transport, even school transport services, these are not managed by the NTT or by the NTC, or the rates are not decided by the government. It is left to them or these associations to decide. So I would not agree with a 60% increase, because the most area affected on this fuel price hike is the public transport or the bus transport. So if we will be only going for a price hike of about maximum 14% to 15%, then I don't see why the container transporters have to go for a price hike at a rate of 60%. So that is not the correct thing to do at this moment.
We'd like to go back to the question of the CTB and the railways. Isn't it time to look at ways to revive the CTB? What plans ahead to peopleize or privatize or bring in ventures that will support or new projects? What do you have in the cards?
First of all, the CTB, we have managed to get it within the scope that we needed. So we are not running with excess staff. We have the correct number of staff. Previously, the CTB had to maintain, I think, about 15 staff members per bus. But now we have managed to bring that down to about 3.5 to 4, which is the required amount. Railways has a lot of restructuring has to be done, so we are working on it. And as you very correctly said, we are looking at utilizing the assets they have, probably in public-private partnership version. And also we need to look at generating income through other means, not only transport, but CTB and railways also has to start generating income by other means, not only transport. So CTB, we have got the necessary authorization to start up about 50 or 60 fuel stations.
Very quickly, along with that, any measures to provide relief to people, the public as commuters, and through railways or maybe the CTB? This
is what the Treasury told us, because when I discussed with them, what their point of view was that we cannot subsidize the fuel supplied for the buses, but we might look at option where the worst affected or the daily traveler or the most affected person could be given some sort of subsidy, maybe a season ticket, maybe some sort of credit facility, maybe a lower rate for school children and daily people who travel for work. So the Treasury is looking at that aspect also.
Thank you very much, Transport Minister Dilum Amunagama, joining us on First at 9. We take you to some international news on the same subject. Oil, gas and food prices have risen to record highs in many European countries as the sanctions on Russia by the West over the Russia-Ukraine conflict have somewhat backfired. On Friday, Brent crude futures rose by $3.34, settling at $112.67 a barrel, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude figures rose by $3.31 to end at $109.33 a barrel. Meanwhile, the reliance on wheat from Russia and Ukraine has seen the wholesale cost rocket by nearly 50%. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, with the supply chain of grain from Europe's breadbasket cut off, they forecast that it could threaten to lurch the world toward a new food security crisis. Russia and Ukraine are both major exporters of wheat Russia's wheat production and exporters or export share account for about 10% and 16.9% respectively of the world's, while Ukraine's export share of wheat and corn account for 11.6% and 16.4% of the world's separately. And we'll return after a short break here on AdaDerana English.
Big 3.
An International Monetary Fund delegation is scheduled to visit Sri Lanka next week to discuss the current economic crisis facing the country. During the visit, the IMF representatives are expected to hold discussions with Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and other senior officials of the government. On Friday, foreign media quoted sources within the Sri Lankan administration that the country is expected to begin discussions with the IMF on a plan to help restructure its debt and manage its foreign exchange shortage. Reports also said that Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa will travel to Washington, D.C. in mid-April to present Sri Lanka's proposal to senior IMF officials. However, Central Bank Governor Ajit Nivard Cabral denied the media reports on social media, stressing that the scheduled meetings are not for the purpose alluded to in the reports. In the meantime, Finance Minister is expected to visit India next week for a final discussion on securing a $1 billion credit facility. The United National Party leader Ranil Wickremesinghe says that toppling the incumbent government or going in for a national government is not the solution that Sri Lanka needs at present. Instead, he says that a national consensus on what the solutions are to be the economic crisis is more important ahead of any talks with the IMF.
මෙතෙක් කල් විශාල ඩොලර් රිංගයක් තිබුණා. ඩොලර් රිංගයේ තියෙන නිසා අපිට බඩු භාණ්ඩ ගන්න බැරි වුණා. ඒකට විසඳුමක් හැටියට එක සැරේම ආණ්ඩුවෙන් මහ බැංකුවෙන් රුපියල පා කරා. ඒත් දැන් රුපියලත් ඒ වගේම පා වෙනවා විතරක් නෙමෙයි අර තද රැල්ලකට වාගේ දැන් උඩහට යනවා. පල්ලෙහාට තාම ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. ඒ එක්කම අපිට තාම මේ ප්‍රශ්න මෙතනින් ඉවර වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක මතක තියාගන්න. මේ ජූනි මාසේ අපිට ඩොලර් බිලියනයක් ආපහු ගෙවන්න තියෙනවා ණය හැටියට. මෙන්න මෙහෙම උග්‍ර ප්‍රශ්න අපිට තියෙන්නේ. IMF වාර්තාව ආණ්ඩුවට දීලා තියෙනවා. ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම එන සතියේ තියෙන රටේ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය ගැන තියෙන සාකච්ඡාවට ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ සතිය අපිට ඒවා ලබා දෙයි කියලා මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ආණ්ඩු මාරු කරනවා කියන එක නෙමෙයි දැන් තියෙන ඉස්සෙල්ලා මේ තියෙන තත්ත්වය විසඳ ගන්න. නැත්තම් ඊළඟ මාස කීපෙදී අපිට රටක් නැති වෙනවා. මෙතෙන්ට ඕන ජාතික ආණ්ඩු නෙමෙයි. ජාතික ආණ්ඩුවේ වැඩක් නැහැ. ඒ පාර කැමේ ඇමතිකම් බෙදා ගන්නවා. මෙතෙන්ට ඕන ජාතික එකඟතාවයක්. ඒකයි ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන් අපි කරන්න තියෙන ඉස්සෙල්ලා.
Now, India's Adani Group has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Sri Lankan government following cabinet subcommittee approval to invest $500 million into two renewable energy projects in the northern province. The two projects, one in Mannar and the other in Punarine, are expected to provide 500 megawatts to the national grid, with the company having assured the government of completing construction within a year.
Friday's announcement by the Ministry of Power of the signing of a joint venture agreement between the Ceylon Electricity Board and India's National Thermal Power Corporation Limited for the development of a 100 megawatt solar power plant in Sampur is a good sign for Sri Lanka's recurring tussle with fossil fuel generated power. However, another agreement was signed on the same day that seems to have avoided the media radar. According to local news sources, India's Adani Group, synonymous with its port-related businesses across the world and as of recent times Sri Lanka as well, has signed a memorandum of understanding with the government for a large-scale renewable energy project in the island. According to sources, the project that involves Adani Group, the Ceylon Electricity Board, the Renewable Energy Authority and the Board of Investment will see two projects set up, one in Mannar and the other in Punarine. The signing of the MOU has been confirmed by the Secretary to the State Ministry of Solar Power, Wind and Hydropower Generation Projects Development, KHDK Samarakun. Meanwhile, the total investment in the two projects is estimated to be a whopping $500 million and is expected to generate 500 megawatts of power, and has received approval by a cabinet subcommittee set up to expedite renewable energy projects. Sources say that Adani has informed the government of its intention to complete the project within the space of 1 year. The MOU comes on the heels of a visit by Adani Group Chairman Gautam Adani in October last year, where his team visited the Mannar district to look at the feasibility of wind power generation in the area. In December last year, the government suspended a proposed Chinese-funded solar power project that was expected to be built on 3 islands in the northern province due to Indian security concerns. Following the suspension, the Chinese company Sinoso then signed an agreement with the Maldives to build solar plants on 12 islands. Meanwhile, Minister of Highways Johnson Fernando revealed today that instructions have been issued by President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to the country's authorities to generate 5,000 megawatts of power through renewable sources and add this to the national grid within the next 6 years. He added that the government expects the Adani Group to invest in several more energy projects in the country.
State-owned LP gas supplier Litro Gas warns of a major shortage that could be expected if sufficient US dollars are not released to the company to clear at least one of 2 shipments currently anchored in the island's waters by tomorrow. Now, the company says that the shipment that was unloaded on Friday may only last for 1 more day as the public once again line up outside retail outlets.
In a backdrop where the country is facing a fuel and power shortage, people have begun queuing up at Litro gas outlets to get their hands on gas cylinders due to talks of an imminent gas shortage. However, the rumours are not unfounded as the dearth of foreign reserves has made opening letters of credit for imports near impossible. As a result, shortages of gas has severely affected the daily lives of the public as well as entrepreneurs operating small businesses such as restaurants, hotels and bakeries. Today, state-owned Litro Gas confirmed that a shipment of LP gas that was unloaded from a tanker last Friday would only be sufficient to cater a single day's consumer demand. The company added that 2 LPG tankers are currently anchored in Sri Lankan waters, but the company is unable to source a sufficient foreign exchange to clear the shipments and begin unloading. The company also stated that it will be crucial to be able to clear at least one of the tankers tomorrow to prevent a further shortage.
The Department of Meteorology warns that heavy rains accompanied by thunder showers could be expected in the southwestern part of the island due to the ongoing southwest monsoon. As such, the department urged the public to take measures to stay safe during this time.
The Meteorology Department issued a weather advisory today stating that thunder showers accompanied by severe lightning are likely to occur in several places in the western, Sabargamuwa and southern provinces in the coming days. They added that there might also be temporarily localized strong winds during the thunder showers. The department went on to say that fairly heavy showers of around 75 millimeters should also be expected in some places in these areas.
We expect this continue this end of this month. Afterwards, we are expecting intermonsoon conditional weather. So within that intermonsoon condition, we are expecting thunder showers in the most part of the island. But still, we have northeast monsoon condition. Therefore, we are expecting some thunder showers in the western part. This thunder showers is accompanied by heavy lightning and also fairly strong gust winds. And sometimes can be expected high intensity rainfall during short period. Therefore, general public is kind of requested to take adequate precautions, minimize the damage caused by lightning activities.
An anti-terror court in Pakistan has filed indictments against 89 suspects for the brutal killings of Sri Lankan factory manager Priyantha Kumara Diyawadanage last year. A charge sheet issued against the suspects has called the crime unforgivable and urged the strictest of punishments to be meted out.
An anti-terrorism court in Pakistan has filed indictments against 89 individuals involved in the lynching of a 49-year-old Sri Lankan factory manager, Priyantha Kumara Diyawadanage, in Sialkot over superior blasphemy allegations last year. Kumara was lynched by a mob comprising hundreds of protesters, including the employees of the factory he was the manager of, on December 3rd, who tortured him and later burnt his body. Following intervention by Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan, a first information report was registered against 900 workers at Rajco Industries factory under several sections of the Pakistan Penal Code and the Anti-Terrorism Act. The incident saw widespread outrage and condemnation across Pakistan, with politicians, scholars and civil society members calling for swift punishment to be meted out to the perpetrators. According to the charge sheet, videos, digital evidence, DNA evidence, forensic evidence, and eyewitness accounts, including that of a colleague of Kumara's who had attempted to save him from the mob, were made part of the investigation. The charge sheet has called the crime unforgivable and urged the strictest of punishments to be meted out.
The annual feast of Saint Anthony held at Katchathivu Islands was held yesterday with a limited number of devotees permitted to attend. However, Sri Lankan authorities also permitted 76 Indian nationals from Rameswaram to join the feasts as well. That also included a delegation of Indian fishermen who were hosted to talks between their Sri Lankan counterparts and Fisheries Minister Douglas Devananda. During the talks, the two sides exchanged their views on the Indian fishing issue and agreed to bring the subject up during an upcoming visit by India's Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to Sri Lanka.
The two-day annual festival at St. Anthony's Church in Katchathivu was held yesterday at the shrine located on Katchathivu Island, located near the Indo-Sri Lanka maritime boundary. The main mass of the church feast, held in accordance with the COVID-19 protocols, was conducted by the Vicar General of the Jaffna Diocese, Very Reverend Father Joseph Jebaratnam, with a limited number of devotees. However, this year the Sri Lankan government permitted a limited number of Indian devotees to attend the feast as well. Among the 76 devotees and priests from various churches in Rameswaram were a delegation of fishermen embroiled in the issue of encroachment into Sri Lankan waters. During the feast, the delegation also met with Sri Lankan fishermen from the northern province and the Minister of Fisheries Douglas Devananda to discuss issues relating to the encroachment and bottom trawling issue that has led to heightened tensions between the two fisher communities. According to reports, the Indian delegation were given the opportunity to share their grievances directly in the presence of the minister, where the issue of Indian fishermen detained by the Sri Lankan authorities, manner in which they were jailed, and the auctioning of their seized boats were discussed. However, the Sri Lankan fishermen had voiced their displeasure over the continued use of bottom trawling nest by the Indian fishermen, who pointed out the need to preserve the natural resources within their traditional fishing grounds. At the conclusion of the talks, both sides agreed to share their grievances during the upcoming visit of Indian Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to the island.
We'll see you again at the same time tomorrow with the very latest. Good night.